أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين، وأفضل الصلاة وأتم التسليم على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. اللهم علمنا ما ينفعنا، وانفعنا ربنا بما علمتنا، وزدنا من كرمك علما يا رب العالمين. اللهم طهر قلوبنا وأزل عيوبنا، وتولنا بالحسنى، وزينا بالتقوى، واجمع لنا خيري الآخرة والأولى، وارزقنا طاعتك ما أبقيتنا يا رحمن يا رحيم. اللهم أخرجنا من ظلمات الوهم، وأدخلنا في نور الفهم، وعلمنا بالحلم، وزينا بالعلم، واجعلنا من الذين يستمعون القول فيتبعون أحسنه يا ذا الجلال والإكرام. اللهم افتح علينا فتوح العارفين، ووفقنا توفيق الصالحين، واجعلنا من المتقربين إليك على علم وهدى وبصيرة يا فتاح يا عليم. وبعد. Alhamdulillah, by the mercy of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and His ni'mah and His fadl upon us, this is the 19th lesson in the book Tibb Al-Ruhani by Al-Imam Al-Hafiz Abu Al-Faraj Abdurrahman ibn Al-Jawzi rahimahullah tabaraka wa ta'ala. In the previous lesson we looked at the disease of excessive sadness, huzn, and today he is going to speak about the disease of excessive gham and ham. And so these are very similar in terms of their meanings, but there are slight differences. So at the end of this, then we'll look at the practical lessons of both, inshallah tabaraka wa ta'ala. So he said, Al-Ghammu al-Babu al-Tasi' Ashar, the 19th chapter, fi dafi'i fudul al-Ghammi wal-Hammi, concerning the repelling of excessive gham and ham. And he said, Al-Gham yakunu lil-Madi wal-Hammu lil-Mustaqbal, that gham, which is sadness, is for the past, while ham is anxiety and fear with a bit of sadness concerning the future. Now, what is the difference between gham and huzn? Because huzn is also to feel sadness for something that passed, something that was taken away, something that was lost, somebody that passed away, something that happened in the past, not in the future. And the gham, he's saying, is the same thing. Gham relates more to the sadness, the gloominess of, in that state of being gloomy. So it's sad, but it's more about the grief. It's more about the state of mind of being gloomy and down. There also may be some connection with the regret. If you look at the word gham, it has to do with covering and casting. Like if there's a ghaim in the sky, the ghaim, when the cloud, you can see the sunlight or the moonlight, but it is blocked by thick and heavy cloud. So the happiness is there, the sunshine is there, but there's an overcast. This is called the ghaim. And the ghamam or ghamama has to do with covering of the body, blankets, and covering of the nose, right? Igtamma, and so on. So it has to do with more of a cast over the heart, a sad gloominess that covers the heart. While huzn is much more in terms of anger, in terms of ruggedness. The word huzn, there's the word hazan or hazunun, that actually means a rough patch of land. A rough patch of land is called hazan or huzun. And then the word huznatun means a rough mountain. So it has to do with ruggedness, rugged terrains. And so huzn is indicative of a ruggedness in the character of the person that is occasioned by grief. Also they have the word huzuna. And huzuna is a word used by the Arabs to mean or refer to a goat or a sheep, but mostly a goat, that is evil by nature. So there was this thing that goats had some bit of evilness, or there's an association between evilness and goat. And there's no wonder that the goat is the symbol of the devil in occult symbolism. So it has to do with that malignant feeling that accompanies sadness. And they say that anger is of the 7 stages of grief. So it's that feeling of being indignant and angry because of something that happens. So huzn has to do more with that deep feeling of anger, and that feeling of being lost, and that feeling of being agitated, and that roughness that accompanies the character of the person in a state of sadness. While gham has to do with more of the grief and the gloominess and the sorrow that, just cause the person to lose composure and to be down. That type of thing is al-gham. And so this is the difference between huzn and gham. As for ham has to do with anxiety and fear of something that may or may not happen in the future. So somebody is anxious about something, or they have fear, sadness, but also fear of something that it didn't happen as yet. It will come or it may not come, but they're expecting some sort of grief in the future. And of course, when we're speaking about these diseases, it's about fudul. This is why he keeps saying fudul al-gham wal-ham, excessive sadness, excessive anxiety. But what is lower than that, what is natural and cannot be avoided, we have no control over that, and therefore it is not wrong, or it doesn't fall within the categories of taklif. Right? This is why Imam Raghib al-Asfahani rahimahullah ta'ala says that the verses of the Quran that says وَلَا تَحْزَنْ or وَلَا تَحْزَنُوا does not mean do not become sad, but it means avoid things, unnecessary things that can generate sadness for no particular reason. Or it can mean avoid excessive sadness, the point of sadness that is within your control, avoid that. What is not within your control, then you're not mukallaf, you're not held responsible legally for that. So he said, Al-ghammu yakunu lil-madi wal-hammu lil-mustaqbal, that gham, gloominess, is for something that passed, while ham is for something in the future. فَمَنِ اغْتَمَّ لِمَا مَضَى مِنْ ذُنُوبِهِ نَفَعَهُ غَمُّهُ عَلَى تَفْرِيطِهِ. He said that if somebody is sad or gloomy because of some sin, they remembered their state of sin, and they are sad over that, then this is okay and this is beneficial for them. We know the stories, so many stories of the Sahaba radiallahu ta'ala anhum wa ardahum. They used to sit and remember their days of Jahiliyyah, and they used to cry. Remember this famous story of Umar ibn al-Khattab radiallahu anhu, when he looked at the date and he laughed, and then he cried, and they asked him why he laughed, and he said that story that he didn't have his idol, and he shaped the date that he had into an idol to worship it, and so that made him cry. He cried because of that, because of the shirk and the state of ignorance. And then he laughed, and he said, well, what made you laugh? He said, I got hungry and ate the date god, so this was funny. So remembering our sins and becoming sad for them is okay, as long as it does not make us too down that we don't want to do any work anymore. لأنه يثاب عليه, because being sad because of sins is something that is rewarded. ومن اهتم بعمل خير ومن اهتم بعمل خير. And if somebody has ham, they're concerned about the doing of good, and so this brings about some sort of anxiety, then this is also okay. Somebody's thinking about the Hajj, For the first time they're going to leave their countries and go to make the Hajj, and so they're very worried about this, and they're thinking how it's going to happen, and there's some level of anxiety. Then that's good, that's okay, to the point that it does not create fear of actually doing the act. So then the person tries to find some sort of excuse not to actually do the thing. Up to that point, it's good to have this type of anxiety and this type of fear. نفعته همته or himmatuhu. If one feels fear and anxiety because of the doing of good, then this is okay. فأما إذا اغتم لمفقود من الدنيا فالمفقود لا يرجع or لا يرجع. And if somebody's feeling sad because of something that they have lost of the world, then that would not come back, and their sadness would not bring it back. وَالْغَمُّ يُؤْذِي, but their sadness would cause harm. فَكَأَنَّهُ أَضَافَ إِلَى الْأَذَى أَذَى, and so it will be like adding to your pain extra pain. كَمَا قُلْنَا فِي الْحُزْنِ, as we've said when we spoke about huzn, that type of malignant sadness. وَيَنْبَغِي لِلْحَازِمِ أَنْ يَحْتَرِزْ مِمَّا يَجْلِبُ الْغَمْ, and a person should the intelligent person should try his best to avoid things that would bring about sadness. Avoid things that would bring about sadness for no reason. People look at TV shows and they get really sad. They look at movies and they get sad for days. Right? This type of thing happens. Avoid that. It's not necessary. In fact, it could be haram. So this type of thing that you have no need for, avoid it. وَجَالِبْهُ فَقْدُ الْمَحْبُوبِ, and the thing that brings about sadness most of the times is losing something that we held dear to our heart, something that we fell in love with. فَمَنْ كَثُرَتْ مَحْبُوبَاتُهُ كَثُرَ غَمُّهُ. So he who has many attachments, the person who attached themselves to things of the dunya, and these things became beloved to them in their hearts, then they would always have more things to be sad about, because the nature of dunya is that it disappears, it goes. That's the nature of the world. كُلُّ شَيْءٍ هَالِكٍ إِلَّا وَجْهَهُ. Everything will come to an end and will be destroyed except Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So the more things that we attach ourselves to, the more possibilities there is for us to be extremely heartbroken and sad when that thing is taken away or when it is destroyed. وَمَنْ قَلَّلَهَا قَلَّ غَمَّهُ. And the person who has the least amount of dunyawi attachments would experience the least amount of sadness. فَإِنْ قَالَ قَائِلٌ إِذَا لَمْ أَجِدْ مَحْبُوبًا اغْتَمَمْتُ. If somebody says, but I also feel sadness when I don't have attachments. Somebody feels loneliness, gloominess because of being lonely. They have no friends. They have no things in the world. Right? They don't have a car, so they have to walk. When they see everybody else with their car, they feel sad. They don't have this, that type of thing. He said, so قِيلَ لَهُ صَدَقْتَ. We say that's true. Not having can also bring about sadness. وَلَكِنَّ لَا يَبْلُغُ غَمُّكَ بِالْعَدَمِ مِعْشَارَ عُشْرِ غَمْ فَقْدِ الْمَحْبُوبِ. But being sad, or the sadness experienced because of not having, is not 1/10 of a tenth of the sadness experienced because of the loss of something dear or beloved. أَلَا تَرَى أَنَّ مَنْ لَا وَلَدَ لَهُ يَغْتَمْ. Do you not see that the person who has no children feels sadness? وَلَكِنَّ لَا كَغَمِّ مَنْ أُصِيبَ بِوَلَدِهِ. But not like the sadness of the person whose child died. Right? There's no comparison between the two sadnesses that are felt in these two situations. Right? They're shatan ma baynahuma. There's a great difference between the two of them. ثم إن الإنسان كلما طال ألفه ألفه لما يحبه واستمتاعه به تمكن or تمكن من قلبه. And a person, the longer he has that love and attachment for that thing of the dunya, and he derives pleasure from it, the longer he enjoys that ni'mah, the longer his love and attachment is for that thing, the greater the pain would be when losing it. Why? تَمَكَّنَ مِنْ قَلْبِهِ. It becomes firmer and firmer. His love for that becomes stronger and stronger in his heart. And so when it is taken away, the pain is greater. فَإِذَا فَقَدَهُ أَحَسَّ مِنْ مُرِّ التَّأَلُّمِ فِي لَحْظَةٍ. And so when that is taken away, for every moment that he enjoyed that, for every moment that he had a loving attachment to that, he feels the pain of every moment lost. So that is the type of pain and sadness that he would experience. لما يحبه لفقده بما يزيد على لذات دهره المتقدم. So a longer memory, stronger attachment, greater pain. وهذا لأن المحبوب ملائم للنفس كالصحة فلا تجد النفس لذتها إلا عند وجودها وفقدها مناف لها. Because having love and attachment for things of the world is like health. Imagine your health, for example. We enjoy it when it's there and we take it for granted, right? But when it is taken away, then we come to value it. When it's taken away, it's munafin laha. That reminds us of the pleasure of having it. So we recognize the pain when it is taken away. So the way to avoid that is to cater for it being taken away. Remember that. Do not take it for granted. Think about it. Thank Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for it. But have in your mind that one day it will disappear. وَلِذَلِكَ تَأَلَّمَ بِالْفَقْدِ مَا لَا تَفْرَحُ بِالْوُجُودِ. And for that reason, there is greater pain in loss than there is happiness in presence. When something is there, we do not enjoy it as much, or the enjoyment of it when it is there is not as severe or great as the pain experienced when it is taken away. So the enjoyment can never match the pain, because the attachment is great, but we take it for granted when we have it. لأنها ترى وجود المحبوب كالحق الواجب لها. And this is one of the greatest mistakes of people. They see or they think of things when they are present, when they exist, when they enjoy the presence of it. They think of it as if this has a right to exist. It exists because it has a right to exist. So I'm happy because it is my right to be happy. It is my right to have X, Y, Z. And so this is how they think about things. So when it is taken away, it seems to them as an injustice, and it causes them to become angry. Sometimes they even direct that anger to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So why does God create sickness? This is the new tagline of the atheists. Why is there suffering in the world? Why is there famine? Why are there droughts? Why are there diseases that are killing people around the world? Well, number one, they don't have the right not to be afflicted. This is not a right of theirs, it's a privilege. They've been given that by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The mulk, everything that exists, is property of God. It's property of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And therefore He has حق التصرف كيف ما شاء. He has the right to do as He will. There's hikmah in everything that He does as well. But even if there was no hikmah, He has the right. If we make a shar'i comparison, certain things may be wrong for somebody to do in the world, But once it is his milk temporarily, because everything ultimately belongs to Allah, but if he has ownership of it, shar'a, in terms of the sharia in the world, then he has haqqut tasarruf. He has the right to do with his property as he wills, according to sharia. The hakim can stop him in certain aspects, but it is his right. So in the same way, everything belongs to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Therefore Allah has the right to do with it as he pleases and as he wills. So nobody has a right to enjoy comfort or a right to enjoy happiness. This is not a right of theirs. This is a privilege given to them by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. When it is taken away, we should recognize that this is done by the right of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to do. This is his right. So when he gives, we recognize that it is his will to give, and when he takes away, we recognize that it is his will to take away, and this is his right. So do not see it as a right of yours to have enjoyment and comfort. لأنها ترى وجود المحبوب كالحق الواجب لها فينبغي للعاقل تقليل الألفة. So it is prudent that the intelligent person decreases his attachments to things of the world. This is why the Prophet ﷺ said in a hadith, kun fi dunya, be in the world as your traveler. Don't have much things. Do not be attached to much. If you're going on a long, arid journey, you don't take everything with you. You don't see people at the airports with beds. You don't see people at the airports with, an entire kitchen and a house. No, just one little bag or just one suitcase and that's it. Because they're traveling. Be in the world as if you're a traveler. Don't have attachments to much in the world. فَإِنِ اضْطَرَّ إِلَى جَوَالِبِ الْغَمِّ فَثْمَرَّتْ الْغَمِّ فَعِلَاجُهُ. So if somebody has a reason to be attached to things that would bring them sadness, then know for sure that the fruits of that attachment will be sadness. Someday or the other, that thing that you're attached to, whether it's necessary or not, will cause you some amount of sadness. There are some necessary attachments that cannot be broken, like one's attachment to their children, one's attachment to their parents, one's attachment to their hawashi, al-qariba and al-ba'ida. These types of things are necessary and cannot be broken. Do not misinterpret the lesson to say, okay, I need to detach myself from my relatives and my parents and so on. This is haram. Right? Qat' al-rahim and breaking family ties. This is not permissible. So these types of things, we need it, it's necessary, but still know in the end it will bring sadness. When your child dies, it will bring you some sort of sadness. When your parents die, it brings sadness. So do qiyas on that pain, the pain of necessary attachments, to those of unnecessary attachments, and then you would feel the need not to be attached to much that there is no need to be attached to. فعلاجه في الأول الإيمان بالقدر. The first cure and the one that is most effective of this disease is to believe in qadar. Have a firm belief in the qadar of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that everything is preordained. Our life, وَلِكُلِّ أُمَّةٍ أَجَلٍ إِذَا جَاءَ أَجَلُهَا لَا يَسْتَقْدِمُونَ سَاعَةً وَلَا يَسْتَأْخِرُونَ. For every people, there is their appointed time when they will come to an end, when they will die. And when that time comes, it would not be brought forth for 1 second, nor would it be delayed for a single second or point something of a second. There is no delaying, there is no bringing forth. There is qadar. In one hadith, the hadith of Abu Dawood radiyallahu anhu, the Prophet ﷺ said, the first thing created by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the pen, and then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said to it, اكتب مقادير كل شيء. اكتب مقادير كل شيء. Write down the appointed times, the decree of every single thing. In some narrations of the hadith it said human beings, some said khalq, the creation. This hadith said every single thing. Your pencil, your pen, your table, your houses, your cars, everything has been written when it will come to an end. Believe in that. Iman bil qadar. Believe in the qadar of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So that when this happens, we have our reaction to it is not anger, it's not sadness, it's not anything like that, but it's acceptance of the qadar of Allah, rida, which is a part of deen. Al-Hafiz al-Imam al-Nawawi rahimahullah in his Tahdhib al-Asma' wa-Sifat defines the word deen as three things: obeying the commands of Allah Azza wa Jal, leaving off the prohibitions of Allah Azza wa Jal, and ar-rida biqadarillah, to have acceptance and pleasure, be pleased with the will of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. وَإِنَّهُ لَا بُدَّ مِمَّا قَضَى, and there is what had been decreed will come to pass. If we feel angry about that, then we're feeling angry about the will of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. ثُمَّ يَعْلَمْ أَنَّ الدُّنْيَا مَوْضُوعُهُ عَلَى الْكَدِرِ, then also know that the nature of the world is that it is built upon sadness. This is the nature of the world. It's not a happy-go-lucky place. It's a place of trials and tests and tribulations. It's not a place where things are lasting either. It's not dar al-maqar. It's dar al-mamar, as the ulama would say. It's not a stable place. It's a place that is meant to be passed through, and then we enter into the akhirah, where we will find stability either in good or bad. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for Jannah, and we seek His protection from the fire. So we should also know this, that this is not the place to seek perpetual happiness. It's not going to happen. It's not the nature of the world. فَالْبِنَاءُ إِلَى النَّقْضِ, so it is built upon naqd. Everything that we build will come to an end. That's the nature of the world. Things come and they go. We build strong buildings and they decay. Right? Everything that we build, this is destroyed at some point or the other. وَالْجَمْعُ إِلَى التَّفَرُّقِ, and everything gathered will disintegrate. That's the nature of the world. وَمَنْ رَامَ بَقَاءَ مَا لَا يَبْقَى كَانَ كَمَنْ رَامَ وُجُودَ مَا لَا يُوجَدْ, and whoever desires that something remain when it is not within its nature to remain is like the person who desires the existence of something that simply cannot exist. فَلَا يَنْبَغِي أَنْ يَطْلُبَ مِنَ الدُّنْيَا مَا لَمْ تُوضَعْ عَلَيْهِ, so it is not proper to desire of the world that which is not in its nature. Like the poet said, طَبَعْتَ عَلَى كَدْرٍ وَأَنْتَ تَرِيدُهَا صَفْوَ مِنَ الْإِيذَاءِ وَالْأَكْدَارِ, that you have by your nature been created on sadness and pain, while you desire to live a happy, pure life free of any sort of hardship and sadness. It's not going to happen. ثُمَّ يَتَصَوَّرُ مَا نَزَلَ بِهِ مُضَاعِفًا فَيُهَوِّنْ عَلَيْهِ حِينَئِذٍ مَا هُوَ فِيهِ. What a person should do is that they should imagine worst case scenarios all of the time. Imagine the worst, so that when they're afflicted with some affliction and it's easier or lighter than they had imagined, then they feel some sort of comfort because they have in their minds, well, it could have been worse. ومن عادة الحمال الحازم أن يترك فوق حمله شيئا ثقيلا ثم يمشي خطوات ثم يولي به فيخف الأمر عنه. He said that the ada of the custom of those people who carry things on their horses and their camels is that they would put something extremely heavy on it. And when they're packing it to carry stuff, they would put heavy things on it, and they would have it walk a few steps with that extremely heavy weight, and then they would take some of that weight off. So the camel feels or the horse feels an ease, and that motivates them to go the rest of the way. But if they're feeling that it's going to be heavy all of the time, or they are accustomed to fetching light loads and then you give them something heavy all of a sudden, the burden would be too hard for them to bear. So what you do is you have them accustom themselves to heaviness, so that the lighter things is or are easier to bear. In the same way, the human being should cater for the worst, so that when they're afflicted by something that is not as bad as they had imagined, then they feel saved. They feel lucky. Oh well, I thought it would have been worse. It's not that bad as I thought. So they have that will and the strength of character to bear whatever difficulty comes their way. ثم ثم ليرتقب زمن العافية هجوم البلاء. And when we're not in states of difficulties, when we're not being tested by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, then in those moments, because we'll have more clarity of mind, not affected by the anger of trials and tribulations, then we can imagine and think about, well, okay, if this happens, if that happens, if I'm afflicted by this, if that happens, then how am I going to deal with that? You cater for that. Well, for now I'm healthy, but a time will come when probably I lose my eyesight, and I probably lose my hearing, I'll probably lose my ability to speak. So you imagine the worst, so that when something comes lighter than you had imagined, it's easy to bear. فَإِذَا هَجَمَ يَكْرَهُهُ. Cater for when times will come when you'll be afflicted. وَلْيَتَمَثَّلْ كُلَّمَا يَتَصَوَّرَ نُزُولُهُ نَازِلًا فإذا نزل بعد ذلك كان ريحا مثل أن يتصور أن يؤخذ ماله كله فإذا أخذ البعض عد الباقي غنيمة. So he said, when you're thinking about things, think about all of it, and think about the most severe form of that tribulation, so that when you're afflicted, it's easy. He said, for example, think about losing all of your wealth. Think about that. Think about losing all of your wealth, everything that you own. Imagine the possibility of that. Imagine that one day will come, this can happen, and it very well might happen. So that if some of it is destroyed, he'll consider himself lucky for having the rest that remained, because he thought, or he had imagined, a time when he would lose all. So he'll consider that ghanima. This is something extra that I've gained. ويتصور أن يعمى, and think about becoming blind. فإذا رمد سهل الأمر. So when we lose some of the sight, like we get night blindness, or we get short-sightedness, or something like that, we have a partial impairment of the sight, not the complete disappearance of it, we feel lucky to have what is remained, because we had imagined losing it all together. وكذلك جميع المضرات. And the same way, think about everything that is harmful. One poet said, ويمثل ذو اللب في نفسه مصائبه قبل أن تنزل. The person of intelligence imagine worst case scenarios before they even happen. فإن نزلت بغدة لم ترعه. And if it descends upon him suddenly, it doesn't take control of him and determine his psyche and the way he's going to respond, because he already thought about his response to that. So he would maintain control of the situation and not be controlled by the situation. لما كان في نفسه مثلا, because he had already planned for this. وذو الجهل يأمن أيامه وينسى مصارع من قد خلا. But the ignorant person, the stupid person, they think about themselves as being safe, and they'll always continue in a state of happiness and joy and enjoying every ni'mah of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and they forgot to think about or cater for a time in which that which they cannot see now will happen. So right now we cannot see the possibility of going blind, so therefore we did not think about what would happen if we go blind. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala protect us from that, and may Allah azza wa jalla cause us to die with all of our senses intact. فإن بدهته صروف الزمان ببعض مصائبه أعولا. And if they are suddenly overtaken by the changing states of time, they are left running around in complete dismay because they haven't thought about reacting to these types of problems. وَلَوْ قَدَّمَ الْحُزْنَ فِي أَمْرِهِ لَعَلَّمَهُ الصَّبْرَ حَسُنَ الْبَلَى. And had the person think about these situations from before, then that thought would have taught him how to have patience and persevere, and his bala would go in a far better way. His tests and trials would be far easier for him. وقال بعض السلف, some of the early generations of the Muslims said, we saw a woman, or rather he's speaking about somebody specific. He said, I saw a woman, and the light that she had in her face, the happiness that she had, was something that impressed me. It caught my mind. فَقُلْتُ هَذَا وَجْهٌ مَا طَرَقَهُ حُزْنٌ. I said that this is a face that never, of a person who never experienced sadness. The woman said, do not say that, because I know not of a person who experienced what I experienced. She said, I had a husband, and he bought sheep to do the sacrifice, and he sacrificed it. And he had 2 sons, and the big one said to the little one, let me show you how our father did the sacrifice. And he killed the little brother. The big brother killed the little one, practicing the sacrifice that he saw his father performed on the sheep. And so then he, out of fear, the big son ran away, escaped, and so they went looking for him. The father went out to find the big son, and the father died and the big son died. So she lost her 2 sons and lost her husband. And so the man said to her, but how is your sadness? Because he's not seeing any signs of being sad on her face. So she said, لو وجدت في الحزن دركا لاستعملته. This can have 2 meanings. She said, if I found in sadness composure and control over myself, then I would have allowed myself to be sad. But if you, darak in this case would be the ism masdar of idrak, meaning if I knew that in my sadness I would maintain composure, have control over myself, and not completely lose it, right, not completely break down, then I would have opted for sadness. I would have chose to be sad. But I know that once you become sad, it can eat you out, so I didn't allow myself to become too sad. Or it can also mean darak, and darak, which means the utmost bottom of something. So what it means is, if I knew that there was an end for sadness, then I would have allowed myself to become sad. But there's no end, so you can say I actually reached the maximum sadness that's possible and now it's time to recover. No, if you allow yourself to become sad and sad and sad and sad, the more you would become, and you would not find an end to the depth of sadness, and that is extremely harmful. So she chose to accept what happened and make the best of it. Bad things happen. How we react determines who we are. وقد يقع الحزن والغم من غلبة السوداء السوداء فيعالج بما يزيل السوداء. He said that darkness coming over the heart is what causes sadness, or causes the continuity of sadness. So the cure for that is to find something that would cause gloominess to go away. يزيل السوداء بالمفرحات. So find things that can amuse you, find things that can make you happy, find things that can make you laugh. Find these types of things and enjoy that. Have friends to cheer you up, that type of thing, but do not wallow in your sadness. وَالْغَمُّ يُجَمِّدْ الدَّمْ. And sadness causes the blood to clot. وَالسُّرُورُ يُلَهِّبِ الدَّمْ حَتَّى تَعْلُو حَرَارَتِهِ الْغَرِيزِيَّةِ. And happiness causes the temperature to rise, and so the blood becomes more fluid. وَجَمِيعًا يَضُرَّانِ. And sometimes that can be too much, and so that can also become dangerous and harmful to the body. So excess happiness and excess sadness can both be harmful. Said وَرُبَّمَا قَتَلَ إِن لَمْ يُعَدْ. Can't recognize that in my print, but he's saying both of them can even be fatal if they are not looked into and treated. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala protect us from things that cause unnecessary sadness. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala give us the ability to deal with that sadness in a proper way. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala ease the difficulties of the Muslims. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala make us from the people of taqwa and iman and salah. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala raise us in the ranks of the salihun. آمين. هذا وصلى الله على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين والحمد لله رب العالمين. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله تعالى وبركاته.